Muted. Catherine, Olympics or Cascades you were looking at?
Cascades. I'm on the east side of Capitol Hill. So every
Good
morning.
afternoon and welcome to the meeting of Rotary Club of Seattle number 4, named for being the 4th oldest club in the world and one of the largest. I'm Beth Knox, your club president. As we convene today, we respectfully acknowledge that we do so on unceded Coast Salish land, specifically the ancestral land of the Duwamish, Suquamish, Stillaguamish, and Muckleshoot tribes. This acknowledgement does not take the place of authentic relationships with Indigenous communities, but serves as a first step in honoring the land we are on. As I shared last week, November is Native American Heritage Month, what started at the turn of the century as an effort to gain a day of recognition for the significant contributions the first Americans made to the establishment and growth of the U.S., has resulted in a whole month designated for that purpose. An early proponent of American Indian Day, was Dr. Arthur C. Parker, a Seneca Indian who was the director of the Museum of Arts and Science in Rochester, New York. He persuaded the Boy Scouts of America to set aside a day for the first Americans, and for 3 years, they adopted such a day. In 1915, President Coolidge issued a proclamation which declared the second Saturday of each May as an American Indian Day and contained the first formal appeal for recognition of Indians as citizens. Now, presently, several states have designated Columbus Day as Native American Day, but it continues to be a day where we observe without any recognition as a national legal holiday. In 1990, President George H.W. Bush approved a joint resolution designating November 1990 National American Indian Heritage Month. Similar proclamations under variants on the name, including Native American Heritage Month and National American Indian and Alaska Native Heritage Month, have been issued each year since 1994. Seattle Rotary Club is proud to honor this recognition. Now, here at Seattle Rotary, we also enjoy music and words of inspiration to kick off our meeting. Don Murphy and Jevin Powell will lead us today in a song, Acres of Clams, that pays tribute to our main speaker. Following the music, I invite President-elect Nancy Cahill to share our inspiration for the day.
Thank you, Beth. Actually, I was really surprised when I kind of looked into the song and found out that Ivar didn't take an old song and rewrote it. The Old Settlers song with the words Acres of Clams was written in 1874. So Ivar's Acres of Clams is named after the song. The country they call Puget Sound. I started one morning to shank it for the country they call Puget Sound. No longer a slave of ambition, I laugh at the world and its shams, and I think of my present condition, surrounded by acres of clams. Surrounded by acres of clams, surrounded by acres of clams. A poor boy will never go hungry, surrounded by acres of clams.
Please be seated. In honor of this week's Veterans Day, I want to acknowledge the first veteran that I knew in my life. My father enlisted in the Army in 1938 after graduating from St. John's University. He fought in Northern Africa and Europe. While in France and Italy, he was involved during the war with helping the French and Italians devise plans they could use after the war to remove landmines from their grounds. He nearly lost his leg stepping on a landmine at the Battle of Anzio in Italy, losing his leg, but not his life. There was not much known at that time on how to help amputees relearn basic ambulatory skills. Plus, the technology for artificial limbs was in its infancy. He spent more than 2 years in Walter Reed Hospital with many others in similar situations. He and the other amputees helped the providers learn strategies for how to rehabilitate and function in a society that had not yet focused on being user-friendly for our disabled citizens. This ties into service above self in several ways. His work on mine removal plans was instrumental in helping Italy and France in their post-war demining efforts. He was awarded with 3 Purple Hearts and also received the French Medal of Honor and the Italian Medal of Honor. My dad did not think of himself as disabled and never complained about the lingering pain brought about by the shrapnel bits that surrounded his body. As a kid, I thought he just didn't use pens very well and had blue markings all around him. He didn't complain. He was a lifelong Rotarian and served on many other nonprofit boards. He seemed to readily make friendships with strangers as encouraged by Rotary, and he loved and cared for others regardless of their background, their job title, or the color of their skin. What a great role model he was for me and for others. I know that we have many in this room who have served our country and or have family members that have served. We are grateful for those of you for all that you've done. Thank you.
Could we just take a moment, and if you are a veteran who have served our country, could you stand and be recognized? Thank you. And I also want to acknowledge any of our veterans who are watching on Zoom today. So thank you, Don and Jevin and Nancy, for setting the stage for our meeting today. Our greeters today were Catherine Darley and Gina Hall. Thank you also to Varsha Matusi for serving as our Zoom meeting host, and to our meeting reporter for the day, who is Paul Casey. Now, we have several guests who have joined us today, and I'd like to introduce them. If you could stand as I call your name, and then we will recognize you all together. A guest of Allison Parker is Ingrid Chapman. We have Kevin Klaus, John Klaus. John is a visiting Rotarian from the Seattle Northeast Rotary Club and our guest of Tabitha Klaus. And also we have little Ripley Klaus, 6th generation, soon to be Rotarian. Welcome, Ripley. We also have guests of Doug Cito, Bill Hogan, Paul Ortiz, and Mahedi Almardi. And if you could all stand. And then we have Joy Shigaki, Tim Kunelholm, Ron Pananen, Angie Brady, and Marshall Foster, who are guests of Bob Donegan. Welcome, all of you. All right, I'm excited we have another new member introduction today. And here to tell you about new member Alice Braverman is Seattle 4 Rotarian Jane Pryor.
And apparently can see you. Okay, here we go. Please join me in welcoming Alice Braverman, Classification, Human and Community Services. A new corporate member of Seattle 4, Alice is Executive Director of Multicare Behavioral Health Foundation, an affiliation of Multicare Behavioral Health, Navos, and Greater Lakes Mental Health Care. As Foundation Executive Director, Alice has unified the fundraising efforts of these 3 formerly independent nonprofits operating in King and Pierce counties. She works diligently to increase awareness about the connections between mental health and homelessness and the impact of mental health issues on youth and children. At the same time, she's raising critical philanthropic support for the myriad behavioral health programs provided by this recently formed powerhouse network. Alice's early career started on a very different track, however. After growing up in the Bronx, Washington, D.C., and Colorado, she took a gap year working in the art business after high school. A job at Hospitality House in San Francisco's Tenderloin soon followed. Hospitality House serves the neighborhood's low-income and homeless population, and it was here that Alice was able to meld her art business experience with her growing passion for serving marginalized populations. You see, Hospitality House operates an art studio, and Alice's task was to turn it into a money-making program to generate support for Hospitality House and its clients. Her successful strategies to accomplish this included creating a line of holiday cards and opening a gallery to show and sell the studio's works. 5 years later, Alice moved to Seattle, and here she continued her work in human and community services for 2 years, this time as development manager at Sacred Heart Shelter on Lower Queen Anne, a safe place for single women and children. Alice then spent the next 9 years at Seattle Goodwill as Vice President of Development and Communications. Here she further fueled her passion for providing support to marginalized populations through economic empowerment and job skills for the underserved. In 2007, Alice became Navos's first Vice President of Development and Community Relations, a position she held for 12 years, until Navos affiliated with MultiCare. The MultiCare Behavioral Health Foundation was launched in 2019, and Alice is its first executive director. On a more personal note, Alice is 25 years married to Patrick Kafer, a financial services professional with D.A. Davidson. Alice and Patrick live in West Seattle and have a 23-year-old daughter, Finley, who lives in New York. Alice loves Patrick, being a mom, running, reading, and her dog, Hazel. With the West Seattle Bridge reopened, we'll be seeing more of Alice. She's expressed an interest in the art committee and anticipates further fulfilling her civic-minded passion through her membership in the Rotary Club of Seattle. Please welcome Alice.
Alice, congratulations. You are joining 2 million members of the longest standing service club in the world. So congratulations. Today's short program is around our district's youth exchange program. Emily Fain and Tabitha Klaus are back with us to share updates on this year's short-term youth exchange program. Emily is a third-generation Rotarian and daughter of club member David Fain. And Emily is a junior at Mercer Island High School and went to Spain this last summer with our district's Rotary Youth Exchange program. Tabitha is a member of our club, fifth-generation Rotarian and previous Rotary Youth Exchange student to the Czech Republic, and is representing the District Youth Exchange Committee. Please welcome Emily and Tabitha.
Thanks, Beth. I'm going to quickly just share a little bit about the Youth Exchange District program, and then I'm really going to hand it off to Emily so you can hear about her incredible experience this past summer. So our district supports Summer Youth Exchange, which is a short-term exchange program. Basically what happens is students apply to the district, and then they're chosen. They go through an interview process, they get trained, and then they head off to a different country for a month and get to live with a host family that also has a student that applied for a short-term exchange student. They get to become friends, hopefully, with that family and with the other student there. And they spend a month learning about culture, learning about different families, hopefully traveling, learning languages, and then they come back and they host that student with them back here in America as well. So Emily got to go over to Spain and then got to bring back the Spanish exchange student with her as well. And they attended the club over the summer. So hopefully some of you were there to meet them. Really, youth exchange is all about cross-cultural awareness, learning about different cultures, but also learning that there are families across the world that live just like you, that sit down with dinner with their families. It's not just what you learn when you typically travel, but you're really diving more deeply into the culture. And so we do have current applications are open right now. So if you have a student that you know, a grandson or daughter, we are accepting applications for next summer, and hopefully Emily will sell you even more on it and she'll get to share about her experience. I'm going to hand it off to Emily.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Next slide, please.
You can keep,
Yeah, next one. Just keep it going. Okay,
all I
there
got,
we go. So as you can see, there I am with the bright red hair, and next to me in almost all the photos is Sophia, who was our exchange student, who also became one of my very, very close friends throughout the summer. So how it kind of looked while she was here, we basically tried to live my day-to-day life, but to the fullest. So as the full American kind of dream. We did attend a Rotary meeting, as you can see in the top left, with another exchange student from Spain. Sophia's from Madrid, so I ended up spending some time in Madrid. But the other student, I think, was from Barcelona. We went to a Mariners game. That's us on 4th of July, like true American, watch the fireworks, eat hot dogs. We also got the chance to go to Mount Rainier and took her boating. Everything people love about Seattle, we tried to do. And the nice thing about this program is the amount of effort you put in is the amount of effort you received. And I found that that was the case in a lot of things. Next slide, please. So then in Madrid was amazing. It was very warm, but you spend time in the water. It's just part of the culture. We spent time exploring. So we tried to do half explore, half relax kind of ratio, kind of balance. So there we have some monuments, churches, palaces we visited. It was beautiful. And then next slide, please. And there's us again in front of more. We would walk around the city. They drive there as their main way of transportation to different cities within the city. It's the subway metro. But so we drove to cities around an hour or so away and got to explore those as well. Next slide, please. And then we also had the beauty of seeing what life is like just living there. In the middle, that's Sophia with what became our friends. And we just had a lot of fun time. We played tennis together. We shared a lot of similar hobbies, which is the beauty. Rotary puts together people that they think will get along, which definitely happen. And another benefit of this program is you really get good cultural home-cooked meals that were delicious. So on the right is an example of one of the dinners we had. Next slide, please. So my why and what this could mean for you. Why did I go abroad and why through Rotary? I wanted to improve my Spanish language. You're fully immersed when you are there. And so I came home fluent, which was a great benefit. And I wanted to experience something new, something out of the box that I wouldn't normally get to experience here, living here all summer. And I wanted my lens and my view to be open, and that completely happened. And that's how you do it, through new experiences abroad and just to make new, different memories. Next slide, please. And then why Rotary? I'm sure all of you know this, but Rotary has a huge international connection. And everyone together, we share the same morals, and we just have an instant connection because everyone is here just to love Rotary. There's a huge international trust and local trust, and just find that people who are in Rotary are good people. And so that's what my experience was like. Next slide, please. Oh, that's okay. If you have any questions, there was a slide that has my phone number. Please feel free to approach me. It was truly such an amazing experience that I think everyone at some point should experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily and Tabitha. All right, now on to our main program. after which we'll have time, as always, for Q&A. Here at the Westin, we have roving microphone handler Ken Colling to spot questions, while Jen Gladish will monitor the Zoom chat for questions. So start filling that in as you have questions for Bob. Now, today's main speaker is a well-known figure in Seattle. For 25 years, Bob Donegan has helped manage Ivar's from its offices on Seattle's waterfront. When he's not running one of Seattle's oldest and most beloved restaurants, he volunteers with just a few organizations. There's the Waterfront Association, the New Park Oversight Committee, the Seattle Aquarium, the Seattle Chamber of Commerce, the Seattle Sports Commission, UW Foster School of Business, Chief Seattle Council of the Boy Scouts, the Washington Hospitality Association, and the Seattle branch of the San Francisco Federal Reserve Bank. So just a couple things on his plate. As you might imagine, Bob seems to have a bottomless capacity of energy. He and his wife live in Richmond Beach, and he joins many of us as a registered member of the Ken Grant Fan Club. Here to give a state of the waterfront report, please welcome Mr. Bob Donegan.
Are we live here? Can you hear me through this one? So it was a little melancholic hearing the Old Settler song play this morning when we came in. The last time I was here, it played, but it was Todd Sommerfeld who sang it. Todd was the music director and died over the summer, and his memorial service was a couple weekends ago. But on to the good stuff. Now, you may know that the first rule of Rotary is to tell the truth. Most of what I'm going to tell you is true, but not all of it is. And this is my perspective. It's not the perspective of any of the other groups. But if you want to know the facts, you just go to this table over here. Angie Brady and Marshall Foster from the Office of the Waterfront, Joy Shigaki, the new executive director of Friends of the Waterfront, Tim Kunaholm from the Aquarium, Ron Ponanen was the first administrator of the Alaska Way Viaduct and Seawall Replacement Program. They've got the facts. I've got the good stories. So here is the first one. Does anybody recognize what this is? This is the reason we have the new park and the tunnel and the new seawall. That's a gribble, and it's about the size of your fingertip. It's a marine boring organism, and as Elliott Bay got cleaned up, the gribbles came back and ate the old seawall. Now, few people know it, but hanging from the old viaduct were two 470 kilovolt electric transmission lines that connected BC Hydro, the Bonneville Power Authority, and all the power in Seattle, Oregon, and California. So if someone had driven a fertilizer truck up to one of the columns of the viaduct and blown it up, it would have shut down the power grid on the West Coast. That's all because of this little guy. How's that? So you may remember in the 1850s and beyond, when Seattle was settled, that Alaska Way consisted of 8 levels of railroad tracks. The original waterfront in Seattle was on First Avenue, and everything west of First Avenue in the central waterfront was railroad tracks. But it became impossible as the city developed to get from the industrial zone in the Duwamish up to Ballard, where the fishing fleet was. So on April 4th, 1953, the city opened the viaduct. And for those of you who are not locals, and I know there's a few who've been here not very long, that's what the viaduct looked like over the central waterfront. You can see Chief Scoggins, Fire Station number 4 in the upper right-hand corner. And on the left is the old waterfront park with the fountain and the aquarium on the left. So here's a quick history of the viaduct. It opened in 1953. 1985 engineers from the University of Washington said it was subject to seismic disaster. February 28th, 2001 at 10:55 a.m., the Nisqually quake confirmed that. The experts at WashDOT said if it had lasted a few more seconds, the viaduct would have come down. The state proposed 2 alternatives to replace the viaduct. One was a cut and cover tunnel whose western edge was the new seawall, and the other was to rebuild the viaduct. Voters rejected both of those alternatives. The governor, the county executive, the port director, and the mayor appointed a stakeholder committee of 24 people to look at alternatives. And we spent hundreds of hours together with Ron, with Grace Kruniken, the city's director of the Office of Transportation, Hey Yoshitani from the port, and the governor, coming up with alternatives. We looked at, from the 70 alternatives that the state had examined after the Nisqually quake, 11. We did costs, benefits, timing, environmental impacts of each of them. By the summer, we winnowed that down to 8. And in December, the state, the city, the county, and the port recommended that we proceed with 2. One was an elevated rebuild, and the second was a couplet, one-way traffic southbound on the outside, one-way traffic northbound on the inside. And the stakeholders, 23 of the 24 stakeholders, rejected those alternatives and said, we want a tunnel plus transit option. Included in the people who rejected those alternatives were Carrie Moon, who came to hate the tunnel, and Mike O'Brien, the city council member from Ballard. Both said, look at the tunnel plus transit option. By January 13th, 2009, a solution was agreed upon. And here is the group of electeds in front of the windows on Washington Waters at the aquarium. And you can recognize all the electeds in there. There's the county. Ed Murray was the head of the Senate at the time. The governor, Greg Nichols, was there. And this is what the solution was. There are 4 parts. In the second column, you see that the state would contribute the cost of the tunnel, $2.8 billion. The county would contribute the cost of transit, $190 million for infrastructure and $15 million a year to operate. The third group was the city, which would do utilities in the park and the seawall, roughly $1 billion. And we were still $300 million short. So the port put the $300 million in so it could control the issue of freight into and out of the zone. So let's talk first about the seawall. For those of you who were not there in 1933 when it was completed, the seawall was built. When the tide came in, the seawall would fall down. When the tide went out, the seawall would fall down. So 14 feet down from the seawall is a relieving platform. And what the relieving platform did was held the seawall in place, and it was supported by hundreds of thousands of piles. Here's a picture at the turn showing the seawall being built. You can see the seawall being propped up there, and you can see the lateral relieving platform holding it up. Notice the railroad cars on the right side. And if you look carefully, there's a guy walking on the waterfront. That's Ken Colling down there. So here's the new solution to the seawall, and that is roughly 6,000 jet grout towers. A jet grout tower looks like a big Kid Valley milkshake machine that drills down to the hard pan and extrudes a viscous material of cement. And it creates these jet grout towers that expand. And instead of liquefying in an earthquake, there's a single piece of concrete that will move together. And the clever thing about the new seawall is 15 feet back from the old seawall is where the new seawall is built. Here is January of 2016. You can see the seawall being built. The water's on the right. There's a 60-foot expanse and it's 20 feet deep. And you can see how dry it is in the seawall construction zone. And here's the clever thing about the seawall. Do you see the pink Z platform? That's a cantilevered portion that extends out over a salmon passage corridor. 2 million juvenile salmon come out of the Duwamish every year. Half of them turn right and they come up by our piers. Half of them turn left and go out by West Seattle. And the juvenile salmon know that whenever they see something dark, that's where the predators live. So they don't come under the piers because it's dark there. Instead, they swim around the piers, but out in the deep water is where the predators live. So the predation rate of juvenile salmon is very high. The Z panel allows the salmon passage corridor underneath because that sidewalk is glass, allowing light to be in there. And the tests that are done by the University of Washington is confirming that juvenile salmon are actually swimming up the waterfront. So second, let's talk about the tunnel. You can see the stadiums down on the left. You can see the Gates Foundation up off on the right. The tunnel starts in the stadium district, cuts under the federal building at First Avenue, and then comes out at the Gates Foundation. Here's Bertha. This is at Hitachi Zosen in Japan that built it, 57 feet, 4 inches in diameter, largest tunnel boring machine ever built. And here's Bertha's sad story. She went into the ground in July 2013. She stopped operating 6 months later. 2 years later, she was repaired. Ultimately, she moved the 9,273 feet, not 9,270 feet. The engineers on the project would be livid if they saw a 3-foot difference up at the Gates Foundation. So all that was prelude to the new waterfront. So here's the new waterfront, and this parts of the presentation came from Friends of Waterfront Seattle. So you know the route. It's roughly the tunnel route. It's 20.6 acres from the stadiums with fingers extending into Pioneer Square. The orange section shows Coleman Dock and extending into downtown. The green section is the north end of the waterfront, and the blue section is up in Belltown with connections into downtown. Remember Railroad Way? Here's the new Railroad Way. There's one section of Railroad Way left in Seattle. It's from Alaska Way to Occidental, just south of the stadiums. And this is what it will look like in the spring of 2025. Well, it's actually the fall of 2025 because the leaves are changing. People going to a Sounders game. Continuing to the north, we're going to play a little game here. And the answer of the correct question gets an Ivar's gift card. What's the mistake in this picture? Pelican is right. There are no pelicans on the central waterfront. So come and get your gift. Come and get your gift card. But this is an illustration of the new waterfront park. That's Coleman Dock in the background, and off on the left is the Washington Street boat landing. This is what it actually looked like from the air a month ago. You can see that you can get down to the waterfront when they take the fences down. In the 10,000 meetings we did when we were trying to figure out what people wanted in the park, the number one thing that people said, didn't matter where in the city we asked this question, was people wanted to touch the water. And you'll be able to go down and actually touch the water here. Continuing to the north, question number 2. What's the mistake in this picture? Washington State Ferries and Hoffman, the contractor, were showing this picture as recently as last week. Look at the cars on the dock. They're facing the wrong way. Nobody got that one, so that'll go into our Powerball jackpot for the next round. This is what Coleman Dock looked like a few weeks ago. Total cost of that project is $467 million. It's on schedule and on budget. Here's another picture of it. And if you look right in the center of the picture down towards 6 o'clock, you can see the wooden new Marion Street pedestrian overpass being built. In a normal year, say 2019, 16 million passengers a year get onto or off a ferry at Coleman Dock, and we don't want them crossing at grade, so they'll cross on the Marion Street Bridge, same as we had the Marion Street Bridge before. There's the Marion Street Bridge last week. You can tell it's last week because the rain has come back. Here's the construction crew up on top of Marion Street Bridge, putting it in place. That building to the right will evaporate this winter. That's the one that Martin Seelig paid more money for than any ground in the city of Seattle or King County. That'll be demolished and a retail apartment and condo building will be built there. Continuing to the north, you can see the Four Seasons Hotel in the olive green in the background and the SureGuard self-storage in the foreground. That's the Union Street steps. There's 132 steps from the waterfront up to First Avenue. And this is what it looked like last week at night. You can see the fern there. There's an elevator so people who have disability challenges can get to and from the waterfront. Walking across the street, this is New Pier 58. You can see the Great Wheel on the left, the aquarium's on the right. There's a kids' play area. There's a concert area. This will be a whole new pier that's built here. This is the same pier You can see the kids' play area in the lower left-hand corner. And the firm that we hired to do the play area builds the play areas appropriate to the region in which they're building it. So all of the art that's in there is aquatic art, octopuses, jellyfish. And here were the first piles going in last week on that. If you go down there now, you'll see that. Continuing across the street, this is the new roadway that's being built. You can see the Pike Place Market at the top. The green columns are the support for the new roadway on the east side of the roadway. The yellow crane on the left side is the new aquarium. We'll get to that one next. And the roadway will extend up the hill. This is what it will look like when it's done. Now, just as we face the issue of 16 million people walking across the street from Coleman Dock, when the new waterfront park opens, Candace Damon, the municipal finance expert that we hired from Brooklyn, tells us that the number of visitors to the waterfront will triple. That means 20 million people a year on the waterfront, which means on a typical summer day, 90,000 people will walk from or to the Pike Place Market from the waterfront. We didn't want them crossing at grade. So they will cross from the Pike Place Market over a bridge onto the roof of the aquarium and down to the waterfront. And here's another view of that. You can go by elevator, you can walk. And James Corner, the architect we hired to do this, who's in town this week, is really clever. Up at the market, to conform with ADA requirements, you can't have a slope greater than 2%. So there's a route that goes northeast, southwest, northeast, southwest. Well, you think kids are going to want to do that? So he's put slides in. There's big stainless steel and plastic slides so kids can slide down. He's as clever as can be. This is what the aquarium looks like. It's a 335,000 gallon tank. It's cantilevered out over what's now Alaskan Way. In the tank, there's a hole in the bottom. You can see it there. It's 32 feet wide. Up on the roof, there's a hole. So on a day like today, without paying admission, you can go walk under the shark tank and you can look up and see the animals swim over the top of you. Does anybody recently come from Rome? Do you know the building in Rome that's got the hole in the roof that the Romans built? What's it called, Beth? What's it called? Oh, there's another card winner. It's the Pantheon. And what's the name of the hole in the roof? So we have a sharkulus. Remember, this is Bob talking. This isn't the aquarium talking. This is the walk down the outside. It'll have great views of the waterfront and west across Elliott Bay. This is the big tank last week. In the tank, there are 3.4 million pounds of rebar. When we asked the contractor, Stu Kibbe at Turner, what could you build with 3.4 million pounds of rebar? He said a 40-story building. This building is 3 stories tall. So it's got enormous amount of strength in it because it holds up that bridge over the walkway. Oh, we had some of the animals get loose last week. The octopus got out of the octopus pen. Now, this aquarium is an interesting place. It will be the greenest aquarium in the world. It uses 5% of the energy of a typical aquarium. It will generate and develop animals that will be put back into the ocean, including Indo-Pacific leopard sharks. The next time you walk to the waterfront, if you look to Pier 60, you will see there's a fence with big tanks there. In those tanks, the aquarium is raising 2 million pink pinto abalone, the first 6,000 of which were planted in the San Juans this summer. It was an abalone that was fished out in the 1980s, and these sharks will be grown in the Seattle Aquarium and sent back out into the Pacific. This is the big tank in the middle. This is the reef. Over 230 species of plants and animals will live in there, 3,500 animals, including the divers. Budget for the aquarium is $160 million, and as of last Thursday, we're at $106 million raised. Continuing, Continuing to the north, this is the first big success of the waterfront park. This is Pier 62. 159 events this last summer. 180,000 people visited Pier 62. And if you need a magical romantic event on a night like tonight, go down and walk on the float on the south side at sunset and look back toward the city when the sun is lighting all the buildings orange. It's magical in the middle of a big city like Seattle. So one of the ways that I think about municipal projects is, do they create economic activity? Since this project was announced, the pier owners have invested $600 million in private development on the piers. In the 13 blocks west of First Avenue between Pike and Yesler, more than $1 billion of new development has happened. This is the Cyrene apartment building between Western University and Alaskan Way. You think it's coincidental that there were 295 cruise ship calls in Seattle this summer? Every cruise line is trying to put its footprint here and lock up those limited number of berths so that when this new park opens, they have access to them. And it's not coincidental that every cruise line used the biggest ships in its fleet in Seattle. This ship here has capacity for 4,000 passengers. It's 17 stories tall. We track the number of people who buy something on the waterfront. You can see in 2019, before Corona, 6.3 million people bought something on the waterfront. At the worst of Corona in 2020, we were down to 1.3 million. Last year, we did 3.4 million. And if Candace Damon is right, that graph will grow to 20 million in 2025. One of the problems we've had on the waterfront is when the viaduct came down, we lost 1,143 public parking spaces. 70% of the people who come to the waterfront come in family groups by car. They didn't have a place to park. So using some of the mitigation money from the city and the state, we have bought parking vouchers at the Pike Place Garage. And if you visit any waterfront business, you get a 3-hour parking vouchers. Year to date through September, we've had 31,333 parking vouchers redeemed. Families are coming back to the waterfront. And we have a whole bunch of passenger ferry service, including the route from Des Moines this summer that the city of Des Moines tested. 17,996 people rode ferries into and out of Seattle. And the route from Shilshole is proposed by County Council member Jeannie Cole Wells to start next summer. The issue is we don't have docks in the central waterfront for them to dock at. So next question, here's the original budget that was agreed in 2009. What did it actually cost the state to build the budget, to build the tunnel? What's the right number? How much was the state over on the tunnel? 3 billion, 100%? More answers? Whoops, well, it's not there. So as of last week, the state had spent $3.090 billion on the tunnel compared to a budget of $2.820 billion. Not included in that are the $170 million that the state will get when it sells the Wasca property and the Bakken building on the waterfront, and the $77 million it earned in the legal suit that Seattle Tunnel Partners filed. So the actual overrun on the tunnel is less than 3%. Don't listen to Mike McGinn last week when he's quoted and saying that this is going to be another infrastructure overrun. It's 3%. So I'll now answer the questions that come up whenever we have this discussion. Where's the project funding coming for the waterfront? Here summarizes the funding for the park. And remember that original slide said the $1 billion cost that the city put in. That includes the seawall. If you add the seawall at $255 million to the $756 for the park, you come to the same billion. But that's where the funds are coming for the park. The construction schedule, remember Bertha was delayed by 2 years. The red lines indicate where the park was supposed to open per the original documents. And you can see that right now the park is scheduled to open in the spring of 2025, the aquarium in the summer of 2024. Why is it taking so long? So the best, most effective of the 13,000 city employees couldn't be here today That's Jessica Murphy. She is the woman who built the seawall and is managing construction of the waterfront park. And if you look at the picture up above, that's Spring Street and Seneca Street with the New Alaskan Way. And then down below is the utility diagram of what she has to put in. That's why it's taking so long. There are 18 different levels of utilities that are being assembled in there. Next question. The old viaduct used to carry 110,000 vehicles a day, of which 71,000 were vehicles that entered north of the Battery Street Tunnel and exited south of Spokane Street. So roughly 70% of the traffic was through traffic. You can see what the traffic pattern was when the tunnel opened. We were at 75,000 vehicles a day, right on schedule. You can see what happened when there were not tolls. Then Corona came in. When the West Seattle Bridge opened, you can see way on the right side, we grew to 47,400 vehicles a day using the tunnel. Oh, there's the slide that's out of place. There's the 3.09 billion, less the 200 million that will be recovered. Everybody asks about waterfront safety. What about drugs and tents and homeless people on the waterfront? We don't have that problem on the waterfront. And the reason we don't have that problem is the 110 members of the Waterfront Association who walk the waterfront every day, when they see a person who's struggling or they see a mess, they take a picture and we send it to the Office of the Waterfront, Friends of Waterfront Seattle, Kent Liu, who's the waterfront cop, the Public Defender's Office, the Department of Transportation, Seattle Parks Department, and within 90 minutes on average, there's someone providing help. Now, some people, like Mike, the guy in the median, takes 3 days to get him into services. But when you walk the waterfront, you won't find homeless people or needles or tents because we're so fastidious about it. And we can do it because the people who are on the waterfront, the residents and the business owners, are down there every day. Then when the park opens, people said, how are we going to be sure that this park is safe? So here are the preliminary rules that will be recommended for public hearing and for the city council in the next month. You can see there can't be amplified sound. It will be like the Pike Place Market, designated music spots. No camping on the waterfront, same as at Seattle Center, no camping. No motorized vehicles on the sidewalks. There's a 12.5-foot wide bike path. Get on the bike path. No pedicabs. Get on the bike path. Don't be running into people. And then last down at the bottom is a bigger description. You'll all have the chance to comment on this stuff. So there are the people who provided slides, data, and information for me. And do we have time for questions, Beth? Anybody have a question? Go ahead, Jan.
There used to be an effort going on to connect the waterfront up through the center. It was called the Mountains to Sound Pathway, I think.
Greenway.
Greenway. What's happened to that effort? Do you know?
It's still there. The focus of Central Waterfront is Pike Pine Corridor, not the Mountains Greenway or the Sound to Lake Greenway. But that's still in the planning. And am I getting that correct, Angie?
Oh, yes, that project is still underway. I mean, that is still working, moving forward. Yeah.
What else? Any more? Well, what an easy group today. It must be the sun. Go ahead.
I've got one from the chat. Could your quality of life crew be extended to the entire downtown for a fee?
Well, it's interesting. 2 years ago, Dow was walking 3rd Avenue because all the Metro buses are on 3rd Avenue. And everybody he asked for a model of what works said, call the waterfront. So when Dow called, we told him what we do. But what's different between the waterfront and 3rd Avenue especially, the people who own the businesses are 4 inches away from the park. On 3rd Avenue, those are franchise locations, those are licensed locations. Those tend not to be the owners. When Bruce was elected, but before he took office, he asked for ideas what he should do first. And one of the things we suggested was clean up Third Avenue. And one of the things we proposed is take money from the Office of Economic Development and buy out those leases of the vape shop, of the check cashing place that are attracting the wrong kind of people. And if you buy out the leases, you keep the landlords whole. So John Scholes and the DSA are working on that stuff, but it works on the waterfront. And it's working better in Pioneer Square. There's no reason it can't work everywhere else. Mr. Bridge.
Well, before you do that, I have just a question. Before we took down the viaduct, we used to have the waterfront trolley, the George Benson waterfront trolley. Any thoughts about doing anything to bring back those Melbourne trolleys that we had?
So 2 thoughts. There were 4 of those trolleys and they've sold 2 of them. So there are 2 of them left that Ben Franz Knight, formerly of the Market, now with Shields Oblest Johnson, are working to get back into service. And one of the things we've suggested is bring them to the waterfront and put them in the location of one of the proposed kiosks as the Seattle Tourist Information Booth. It's hard to put them back in service because the entrance is not at grade, so they're not compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. And we on the waterfront do not support the First Avenue trolley. It's slow, it's inefficient, it takes all the parking off First Avenue. There are no left turns northbound from First Avenue to the waterfront. There are no left turns southbound into downtown. We think it's a poorly conceived project. But when they took it off the waterfront, one of the things we had suggested is continue it on the waterfront, take it up to Pier 91 for those 900,000 cruise passengers to get them into town. And at the time, Metro decided, the city decided it wasn't a good use of funds, so that right away went away.
So you told us about your fundraising for the aquarium. Tell us about your fundraising for the Friends of the Waterfront.
So there's a $200 million philanthropy component of the Friends of Waterfront Seattle. 100 million is to pay for infrastructure, and another 100 million is to pay for operating, programming, maintenance, and landscaping. And as of 20 minutes ago, when I talked to Anna, the Director of Development for Friends of Waterfront Seattle, they're at 101 million raised, so it's similar. If you need a place to put money before year end, talk to Anna or talk to Tim. Any more? One last one? Now, as I told you, not all of that's true. You don't know which is true, but if you have questions, ask the people at the reserve table. They'll give you the facts. I think that's it, Ms. Beck.
Thank you, Bob. There is no better storyteller than Mr. Donegan here. I know that personally, I cannot wait to see that waterfront in full development in time for the 2026 FIFA World Cup, where we will have World Cup way. Yeah, Fan Fest will be down there on the waterfront, so we're excited about that development. Bob, in recognition of the generosity of your time, our club has contributed to Harvest Against Hunger, a nonprofit agency providing healthy meal components to food banks, and we've given 600 servings of healthy produce in your name. So thank you. Ken and Jen, thanks for fielding questions from our members. Our club greatly benefits from the sponsorship of several members, and today I'd like to express my gratitude to our gold sponsors, Liz Powell with Remax on Market and longtime supporter Bob Alexander. To close out our program, we have a few announcements from co-VP of membership, Nicole Klein, after which our Jen Gladish will share what speakers are scheduled in the coming weeks. Nicole.
Has Jen's slide, but I'll be Jen. I like it. If there's a next slide, we have 2 events that we're promoting this today. One is the one we talked about last week, Urban Artworks. So we have Ballard and Shoreline of 2 locations. So pick one by your home, bring your family. Next slide is another shout out for the holiday party. Apparently I was the first and not enough people. You guys didn't, you have to book your calendar. So it is a fun time to get to know people for our new members. Members have been here for a while and we haven't seen each other in person and don't have enough time here. It's a great way to get together. So sign up on the newsletter when you get it.
Hi, I will be quick. So upcoming meeting, note the change of location is going to be at the Rainier Club. We'll have Michael Greer, CEO of Arts Fund, and Sue Nixon for Bloodworks Northwest. Keep in mind, there is no meeting the following week because of Thanksgiving. And quickly, you'll notice the trees that are sitting on your tables. Those are courtesy of Heather Fitzpatrick of Wellspring. Take a tag. This is a great way to support the Wellspring Giving Together drive that starts on November 15th. And it's a quick, easy scan of a QR code and you can see how you can get involved. Thanks.
Thank you, Nicole and Jen. So a few reminders to leave you with today. Number one, we want your leadership skills on next year's Seattle Rotary Board. That will begin in July, that term. And if you are interested in learning more about the opportunities for getting involved, see Jan Levy or me or any current board member, and we'll at least share what the opportunities are and see where there's potentially a match. And if you haven't already, please make your 2 contributions to the Seattle Rotary Service Foundation and the International Rotary Foundation. It is so critical that each Rotarian makes their contribution so we can access the matching grants from Rotary International. And number 3, on November 21st, going to hear more about this next week too, our district has organized a fun way for Rotarians to support Harvest Against Hunger through a bowling event called Hunger Strikes. A number of our members, including me, my team is called the Bowling Stones, have formed teams and are looking for teammates. We'll share more details in Friday's newsletter and on our website, so you can sign up to join in supporting Harvest Against Hunger. And next week, as I mentioned, David Bobanek will give us a few more details about this. And I also just wanted to say one more reminder, Friday is Veterans Day, so please make sure that you are recognizing all of the service members in your network. Now, as many of you know, I'd like to leave you with a few highlights of our Seattle sports teams so you can have some interesting water cooler conversations. Our team had a series of wins this last week. The Huskies beat Oregon State last Friday, and they played the Oregon Ducks in Eugene this Saturday. The Cougars also had a big win last week against Stanford and will play Arizona State this Saturday in Pullman. Now, the Kraken are on a 5-game win streak, right? Beating the Nashville Predators last night and moving into 2nd place in the Pacific Division. They have 5 more home games coming up, so this is the time to go see them while they're on a hot streak. And our Seahawks also continue to lead the NFC West after another win against Arizona Cardinals last week. That was a big one. Now this week, they head to Germany to play the Buccaneers on Sunday. Now, while the Mariners season may be over, the accolades for the 2022 season continue to roll in, as Julio Rodriguez is a finalist for AL Rookie of the Year, and skipper Scott Service is a finalist for the AL Manager of the Year. Now, I'll leave you with this quote. 2 years ago, when Julio was still on the Mariners development team, he said, "If you're going to bet against me, I hope you have a lot of money because you're going to lose it all." Meeting adjourned.